Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. She used to work in a blues bar in Kinsale Island, Leanne Hughes.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 30 of the show. I'm super excited to hit number 30, but it's also really hard to believe how quickly the 30 weeks has really gone by. On last week's show, I spoke about an idea I had around starting a private Facebook group where we can start sharing resources and neat tools, videos, and just support each other. Yeah, really just highlight the things that we're doing in our workshops that are working well and let other people know. So I've had a couple of listeners write in and express interest, which is awesome. And thank you all that have written in. I thought I'd promote it one more time in this week's episode. So if you're keen on joining a support group like that and you think it's worth me setting it up, let me know. So you can tweet me at Leanne Hughes, DM me on Instagram at First Time Facilitator, or shoot me an email, hello@firsttimefacilitator.com. Okay, moving along, and let's get on to our guest this week. And his name, coincidentally, is Murray Guest, and he's a coach, consultant, facilitator, speaker from Newcastle, Australia. And he runs a business called Inspire My Business. It's a pretty apt name because, as you can tell from the conversation, he's an inspirational bloke. We spoke on a Saturday morning just after Murray had finished running 15 consecutive days of facilitation, which included domestic travel and pretty long days. Now, I was pretty astounded by this because I'm pretty wary after 3 days of consecutive facilitation. So he talks about how he fueled himself for this, but also a bit about managing your priorities and knowing the right time to say no, to some opportunities, which is tricky, especially if you're passionate about helping other people. We cover a range of topics in this 40-minute conversation, ranging from the importance of professionalism as a facilitator and the questions he uses to get people to start talking at the beginning of a workshop, through to how you manage behaviours. And he shares a really great story about a time where he did call out certain behaviours in a workshop. Very brave man. Now, many of you work in large organisations and are managers as well. So we also talk about teams and some reasons why some teams may not be performing or working together as effectively as they can or should. Now, like I said, there's a huge range of topics as well as some excellent practical tools that you can use the next time that you're in front of a room. So I will stop talking and let you listen in for yourselves. Show notes and a transcript of this episode are on the website at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 30. I hope you enjoy the show. I'd like to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Murray Guest. Murray, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to having a chat today. Awesome to be chatting with you early this morning. Thanks so much for making some time for me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. And I agree. I think it's great to meet another early bird. 7 o'clock's probably one of the best times of the day. So we should be out and about walking, but we're going to have a great conversation this morning. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Murray, can you tell us a bit about how you entered the world in training and facilitation? Did it find you or did you sort of seek it out?
I really suck it out. Or is that the word? Seeked it out, let's just say.
Sort it?
Sort it out, yeah. So if we go back to about 2005, I was made redundant, or my position was made redundant when I was with Master Foods. I'd been there 11 years and I was comfortable with that because I was ready for something new. As a manager, I really enjoyed developing my team, but at the time I felt like there was something else, something that was driving me, and it was that passion for people that I wanted to do more of. There was a training company we used regularly, and I say we as the Mars organisation and Master Foods. And I actually brought up the courage to ring the owner of this training company one day, and I said, "Do you remember that really loud person on the high performance coaching program?" And he said, "Oh, yes." I said, "That was me." He goes, "Yeah, I remember you." I said, "Can we catch up? I'd love to talk to you about what it is you do, how you do it." And in the 90s, they did, this company, Amazing People, did some really good programs, not just around coaching, around leadership, experiential activities, rope bridges and climbing stuff. Anyway, so I rang Paul And Paul said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. Paul's an awesome coach. And so we went for a walk one morning. We had a great chat, and he gave me lots of food for thought, gave me a reading list, which I've still got and I still go through. So that was great. Anyway, he said to me, okay, there's something in you. I don't know what it is, but you've got something. So I'm going to give you a chance. Here's one of our models. I want you to come and present that to my wife and I that run the business next week. And I was like, oh no, does this mean the thing I wanted actually might happen? And now I have to actually do something. And so all that week I went, okay, how would I talk about this model? And it was a communication framework. And then obviously it went well, because that led me to starting with them as in a facilitator role. Did some facilitator training with them. And I actually remember the 2-day facilitator training, and you got paid for that attending, which was a great framework, and met all these facilitators, and some I'm still good friends with now, nearly 12 years later. And when I was leaving, I actually rang my wife, and I had tears in my eyes saying, I found my tribe, I found what it is for me, and it was awesome. So that kicked me off in the training facilitation space. I then worked for amazing people for about 3 years as a facilitator, into coaching, and then in a business development role. And that really inspired me to, follow that passion I have, I guess, for helping people be the best they can and helping people work together better as well.
Yeah, so you use the word inspire, and your business is called Inspire My Business. So obviously the word inspiration is pretty important to you.
Yeah, and it's funny, and I say this in my programs now that I run, and I get some weird looks and some people that nod their head. And I actually say I don't like TGIF, which is, obviously thank God it's Friday. Because when we're thinking that, we're wishing away our week, we're wishing away this time with these people that often we spend more time with than our own families. And I say, well, it should be TGIM, that I'm inspired to come to work on a Monday. I'm inspired to come to work each day because I've actually got that connection. I'm engaged with what I do. And I've said that to a few teams. And they're like, TGIM, no way, I can't wait for every Friday. But I hope to give people an insight to what's possible when I run a workshop. And then obviously workshops aren't the only thing, as we know, Leanne. It's about what happens afterwards. But helping people then create that culture where people feel that way.
Yeah, so look, it was really brave for you to give that guy a call, and you must have been pretty nervous before that. In that 2-day workshop that you had, that facilitation workshop, do you still kind of remember some of the skills that were taught and skills that you still use now?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've reflected a lot on the content of the 2 days. There were certainly some basics around where you stand, how you present yourself, the professionalism. There was a big message in what amazing people did, and they still do a little bit now, around that professionalism, how you show up each morning and how you present not just yourself but the environment and the space and simple little things like, unfortunately, I'm sure you still see people walking in front of the projected screen. I've got cables going all through the room. I've got stuff up the front of the room. So some of those are all basics I got. But what really stands out is the feeling of when you do get that nervousness or those pterodactyls flying around in your stomach, they're bigger than butterflies, and how you feel when you create a space where people are open and it's trusting and they start to share about how they're feeling and identifying ways to make things better, whether that's in teams or leadership or coaching, whatever that might be. So it was a lot of fundamentals. Since then, I've done a speaker's course, my frontline management course back years ago, and got some skills there, Cert 4 and training assessment. And the other training company I mentioned to you earlier, I did stacks of facilitation with them as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Creating that safe environment, we spoke about before we turned on the record button that we both previously worked for mining companies, and you can walk into a room and there's just a room of big burly blokes with their arms crossed looking at you and thinking, what are we in for today? So how did you, develop the skills to disarm that or work with that as a trainer for a big mining company?
So good question. And I've unfortunately have experienced some of that resistance, not just in mining. So be careful. We don't think it's just them. I've experienced it in professional organizations as well. I was with a real estate agency yesterday, and there was some of that, not so much there, but, a little bit. I've had it with rail construction. Now, I wonder, Leanne, what's the quote that we can share? I don't want to swear on the podcast this morning.
We've had people swear in the past.
Yeah, well, I try. I don't think I should, but I have had, I don't know if you've had something like this, but who the F are you and why should I listen to you?
Yeah, I haven't had that in those words, but I've had it reflected through body language and I felt it. I felt that quote thrown at me, yes.
Well, the feeling can be just as strong, can't it? Yeah. I had the feeling and then the language to go with it. I've had that. So your question is a great question. So how do we deal with that and how do we build even that resistance to that? So for me, it's been, I guess, understanding where they're coming from, that there's a whole story that has led to them getting to that place where they are now, where they're so resistive. And that story may have come about through not feeling supported by their leader, not being listened to, that they've suggested ideas before and they've gone nowhere, or they've suggested ideas and they have no idea. And those ideas could be around safety, efficiencies, production, or anything. So there's all that. There's all the unfortunate poor training experiences that people have had, and therefore that builds up those negative frames again. And also I think people feel like, and Paul from Amazing People said this early on, he said people can actually leave training, go back into the workplace, and then become less engaged than before because they experience what's possible and then they go back and there's nothing happening in the work environment. And so they go, hang on, whether they say it or they realize it or it's subconscious, but they get to this point of, I've found out what's possible and now I'm back to where we are and I feel less engaged because of it's just like this. So I guess my first thing is understanding where people are. And then the second point is it's actually not about me as a facilitator, that it's actually about all of the stuff that's been going on in their lives or in their work environment, and building up that, I guess, that a bit of confidence to know that as a facilitator, I'm there to support them and help them, and that whatever it is that they're feeling, that's happening even before I'm there. And so those frames they're developed, they're applying to me as a facilitator or a trainer or the actual training event itself. So first thing, understanding where they're coming from. 2, knowing that's not about you. And 3 is actually at the start, I'm very big on setting up the, I guess, the environment and the intent of the workshop, as long as it may be, whether it's half day, day, or longer. But I think that's the other thing. So I do a lot of strengths-based workshops and facilitation, love Strengths Finder. I use it in some way every day. And I was talking to someone recently about strengths workshops, and they said, so what do you do what activity do you do strengths-based in the first session, in the first 10 minutes? I said, I actually don't talk about strengths till I might drop a hint to it, or this is what we're doing, we'll share the agenda. But I said generally the first hour, maybe hour and a half, is about those foundations. Why are we here? What do you want to get out of the program? How can I serve you? This is the intent. Talking about the attitudes that we bring to this workshop today. And I do a fair bit around our attitudes drive the way we show up and that performance we're going to achieve in life and in the workshop today. So, yeah, those foundations, I think the other part that is so important, where not just bang, hey, let's go, I'm going to train you or facilitate in X, Y, and Z. It's actually, why are we here? And let's talk a bit about that. And then, like you said, Leanne, you'll start to feel the body language, feel the energy, see what's going on, and then get that, okay, where's maybe some of those people in the room that need a bit more encouragement or a bit more support, or what that might look like.
Wow, so many interesting points that you've covered there.
Are you familiar with the 3 H's?
No.
So I can't remember where I heard it, and I think I do. It's from a client, but I can't remember them. I can't mention their name. So there's hostages, hard workers, and holiday makers.
Are these all the 3 types of people in your workshop?
Yeah.
I love that. So the holiday makers are there just for the catering.
Yeah, I love it. I'm just here for the catering. It's a day off my normal job. I'm not going to get that involved. And I might even just be, sitting here having a good time. Hostages, they're there because they've been told to be there, and I don't want to be here. But guess what? Management or someone has said I have to be here. So I'm a hostage in the room right now. Don't speak to me. And then we've got the hard workers. They want to be there. They want to learn. They want to participate. They want to contribute. And we want them, of course. I've been, I'm happy to say, brave enough to actually call in the room. I actually looked around the room and went,
really?
Yeah, I had my big boy pants on one day, or a few days I have. And there was the guys, a couple of guys. Well, first off, there was a lot of talking over the top of other people, which is one of my pet hates. So that's another thing I do at the start of every workshop is let's set some ground rules or agreements or protocols. So we do that. So these guys were talking, and then we moved on a little bit, but I could see the body language, and they were just not engaged, folded arms, legs crossed, even turning their whole chair away from the rest of the group and looking out the window. And I just said, guys, when I run these sessions, we can have these three types of people in the room. They could be X, Y, and Z, the three H's. And I just walked over and I said, hostages might look like this.
Geez, that's brave.
Yeah.
Good on you.
And I said, and if you're in that, I said, what do you think you're going to get out of today? What are you going to achieve? I'm here to help you work together better, get to know each other better, and actually when you get back to work, support each other to actually work together safer, more efficiently. And if you come today with that attitude and you feel like that, you're only going to get out of it what you put in. And then we just unpack that a bit more and we explored that. And then the first activity, I always say, we're actually going to think about applying that mindset of how we show up to this first activity. So you're going to get out of it what you put in. And I generally do a speed questions activity and start with some personal questions into some work questions. So it's not just straight into the hardcore feeling vulnerable questions, but some real simple ones to start with and some fun ways to determine who goes first in those pairing up. And then that breaks down the barriers.
So what are the fun ways that you use to determine the first person? Is like heads and tails, scissors, paper, rock, things like that? No.
So I might do things like who's got on the cleanest boots?
Nice.
Cleanest boots. Who's got the most hair on their head? Because we've got lots of guys these days with big beards and not much hair on the top. So hair on the heads. Whose birth date is soonest? For office-based teams, I do a lot of who's got the fanciest shoes on. So that's always a bit of fun. Who's the person who was most recently on an aeroplane?
Oh, these are really good questions.
Yeah, just simple ones, and they just make it a bit easy. Who's got the most visible jewelry?
I think that would be me usually. I love blingy necklaces. Yep.
Okay. Well, you got guys with watches and rings and things as well, and things like that. Who's travelled the most distance to get to this point this morning? So then they started to get to know each other and about distances and things like that. And so a range of who's been to the cinema most recently, who's been to the football most recently, whatever it might be. So things like that, which just make it fun and interesting. Who's got the overall darkest coloured clothing on? But if they're all in PPE, it makes it a bit hard. But, yeah, things like that.
Or the dirtiest PPE.
Oh, well, yeah. Sometimes that can be an indication of other things as well, as we know.
Yes. You mentioned the Strengths Finder tool. It's one of my favourites as well. You also said that you use it every day. How do you use it personally to, I guess, inspire your everyday life? I
was exposed to Strengths Finder in 2012. I got a lot out of Strengths Finder just from the framework, the language, and what it means. I use it every day now in my conversations with my wife, conversations with my children, with people I coach and workshops I facilitate. The research that Gallup has done indicate when people are working in a strengths-based team and working in that strength zone, they're in a state of flow. There's so many benefits for the individuals of the team and the organisation. You know, we can talk about innovation, productivity, engagement, safety, communication, so many things. So For me, honestly, there's something on our fridge at home around strengths. And I think I've lost count. I can go back to the system, but I think around 1,200, 1,300 people now in 3.5 years.
Wow.
And I love it. I presented at the Clifton Strength Summit in Omaha this year for the 3rd time in a row. So I presented at each one of those. And that was great just to connect with over 1,500 strengths coaches from around the world. How I use it, fundamentally, it's about making people right instead of making them wrong, and giving a language to do that. And we don't quote our top 5 strengths or any of the themes, but certainly thinking about that. So knowing my wife better and her perspective and where she's coming from and the way that she might do something, and seeing that as something that is bringing something I don't have, and that's a good thing, and it's right. It's not trying to make her wrong. Same as my children, and I've got a 20-year-old daughter and a nearly 16-year-old son and a 9-year-old son, and I try to be a strengths-based parent. And what I mean by that is looking at what they bring, what's their individual strengths and talents, and giving them the chance to harness and use those. Even when my daughter was a teenage girl challenges, which you may be familiar with, Leanne. She was storming through the house one morning, and it was all about how there was all those girly sort of fights and bitchiness going on. And she was trying to solve all the problems. And she's high in restorative. The restorative's number 2 or 3. And she said, "It's my restorative. I'm trying to fix everything." And so we could have this great conversation about, yes, it's part of how she's going to show up without even realizing, but also do it in a way that's helpful and supportive and not trying to solve everything. And those blind spots and those weaknesses that we have when we overdial and overplay our strengths.
I've got maximizer as one of my strengths that I tend to overplay in terms of like cramming everything into a day and going on holidays and booking the itinerary to the minute so I can get in everything. So, yeah, there are some ways that you can overplay it. But, I sort of, when I dissect things and look at my husband as well, we're on the opposites, not opposite spectrums, but we don't share any of the top 5. And it is just a great way of understanding how other people work and the way that they interpret life. Just noticing that one of your speaker topics was stop fixing people, why developing a strengths-based culture makes good business sense. What kind of topics do you cover in that? And also, if you had a team that came to you and said, look, we're a team in conflict, no one's getting along, how would you use the strengths tool to assist them in working through that?
Yeah, stop fixing people. I think as a manager, so when I was leading teams at Master Foods and then at Tom McGowan Aluminium, I led a team there of trainers at L&D. I'm sure in times I was trying to fix people, trying to get them to do the role as I thought they should, or even get everyone in a team that are in the same role to do it the exact same way, which, as I say that, it just sounds so ridiculous.
It's still happening.
Yeah, I know, but when I say those words, and I'm just thinking, we're not robots. Yeah. We're not all the same, and fundamentally, creating a space and the opportunity for people to apply themselves in a role the way which is through their strengths and preferences. So when I think about stop fixing them, I'm trying to say, make them do it a way that you think, or the way that, hey, the job description says this, so it should be done like this. And I'm not meaning compliance, and I'm not meaning that there's parts of the role that need to be done. I mean that it's the way they apply themselves to doing it, because they are different things, as we know. So in that topic, certainly thinking about how leaders create a space where people feel they can do that, and having conversations where they can understand what that looks like for different people in their team. So not just saying, hey, I'm strengths-based, that's it, but actually talking through that and investing in the time to understand what that looks like for each person.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. The other part is team members. I've worked with a lot of teams where team members, whether they've been in the role for longer or they're even stronger in self-assurance or talents like command, and they are so set on it should be done this way and we should approach it this way, and they're making their other team members wrong, or even redoing their work or following them up or bitching behind their back, as opposed to letting it go. If the work's being done to the standard we expect in the team and the organisation needs, and it's being approached in a different way through someone's strengths, let's understand that and how that works in a really productive way. And why does someone approach it a different way? So, like you said, appreciating the different, I can't remember the word you said, aspects maybe of people. Yeah, so doing that. So, yeah, in that topic when I present about that is helping people understand the why of how you do that and the why of the benefits of that, and just some tips to do that we talk through like that. Dysfunctional team that you mentioned. Have you ever met one, Leanne, maybe?
I've met quite a few in my 12 years in the corporate world. They're unavoidable. They're everywhere.
What? Can I just ask, why do you think there is so many?
Because I think I was talking to someone yesterday, a colleague, about this, just about the work environment as well. And, with our family, we can't choose our family. We can choose our friends. The work environment is you're drawn to a vision of a company, but you come in and people from all walks of life are in there in this kind of manufactured environment where we just need to get along. And we don't really take the effort to do that. We just assume that you've got a role description, and if a lot of companies are quite technical focused and just everyone's going to go in and we're going to assume you're going to do the right role, but we're human beings. At the end of the day.
True.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we have relationships, don't we?
Yes.
Relationships with our partners, relationships with our children, with our families, with our friends. But what are those relationships at work?
That's right.
Yeah, and they're the ones that aren't being invested in. They're the ones that, whether you're spending 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, or 38, it doesn't matter. That's a lot of time with people that you work with day in, day out. So if we're all humans and we all have our different needs and different talents and different preferences for how we like to work, and as a human animal, we're a tribe animal, aren't we?
Yep.
We're a pack animal. So let's invest in the pack. I think you're right. A lot of those dysfunctional teams, it's like, okay, we're all together in a group. We're not a team. We're in a group. Now
you're right. So the team is not even defined. There's no sort of team vision or anything. It's just and teams can work across different functions and different locations. And again, nothing's really invested in building that relationship.
And let's just do the work, as opposed to let's invest in understanding ourselves more and understanding each other. And I think the other part is you ask about what dysfunctional teams need. I think help in letting go of the past, because quite often I can't recall someone approaching me and saying, we've got this brand new team that don't work well together. It's a team that have been together for a period of time. It's not like, Shazam, here's a brand new team, they don't work well. It's like they've been around for a while. So there's a build-up of toxicness that needs to be processed to move forward. That's the old world. We can't just jump straight in the new world. We've got to process the old world. We've got to provide some ways to let go of the past and maybe let go of being right. So I think about a pond. You can go to the park and see a pond. It's got this beautiful water on top, and then you've got all that murk underneath.
Yeah.
We've got to stir that murkiness up sometimes and filter it out and let it go, and then get that clean water again.
Yeah.
I was working with a team a couple of years ago, I think, or 18 months ago, and dysfunctional, not supporting each other, not talking. They're a maintenance team supporting a manufacturing plant. So bad that they weren't just stabbing each other in the back, stabbing each other in the front, had their breaks in separate areas. When they would complete a job and you have to communicate where you are up to in that part of the process and that job to the next person, they wouldn't even talk. They would sort of just leave the part on their workbench and not pass on the work order, not even talk. Like, it's terrible. But then you had some people that, like, this is it. Thank God it's Friday every week. We just, we're clocking in, clocking out. And of course, there's a flow-on effect to the rest of the organisation and the perceptions and a whole range of things. Anyway, talked to the manager and he said, so this is all the stuff that's going on. Can we do a half-day workshop to fix them? And I said, I'm not a magician. Like, hang on.
That's such a common question, though. We've got 1 hour.
Leanne, what can you do in an hour? Let's go. No. But that I think that unfortunately is indicative of the problem of we're not thinking they are people. Mm. And the learning process and the learning style and how that is different for each person, and the fact that it takes time to talk and process. Can I just say, yesterday's session I was doing with a client, someone in the team said this awesome moment, and we're talking about where they're at in regards to becoming a high-performance team. And they're doing really well, and they've invested a lot. And the question was, so what does it look like if we were best practice? And then we explored that, and we're talking about the way of supporting and collaborating and some specific behaviours. And this lady said, we would be having more conversations like this without you. And I said, exactly.
That's the aha moment, isn't it?
Yeah. And I said, yeah, it's about not needing a external person to come in here and help create that space, but you are creating that space and that culture for you to have those conversations at a frequency, at a productive time and in a productive way to help you develop as a team. Mm. Yeah.
That would have felt really good for you to hear that. Someone in the group saying that. You would have been so happy.
That was mic drop. I'm out of here.
Yeah, done. That's right. Done my job. There's the invoice.
That was good. That was really good to hear that. And the build on that was, so how do we do that? What does that look like? And we talked a bit about that, which is great.
Yeah. So that was a client that you facilitated yesterday. You did mention before the call that you have facilitated 15 days straight.
Yeah, that was one of not so good decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk through that. So your energy levels, and was it with the same client, or were you jumping off to different topics in different places, or how did you get through it?
Okay. So I was facilitating in Newcastle, Sydney, Adelaide. So there's some flights in there as well, and Melbourne. Actually, I did Melbourne as well.
Oh my goodness! You didn't mention that you were flying between places as well.
I had a 1 day flight to Melbourne. Now, and the truth is, when I was in front of those groups, I was energetic. I was on. I felt good. I was in that state of flow. At the end of the days, towards the end, I started to feel it. I started to feel a little bit fatigued, that's for sure, even jet lagged, coming off night shift sort of feeling. I wasn't at my best at home, so I wasn't present like I'd like to be for my children and my wife. So I know that was a flow-on effect. I was in bed early, and I'm in bed early generally, an early riser, but even more so. And as I said, jokingly, but seriously, it wasn't the best decision. It was about my scheduling and saying yes. And you want to talk about the basements of talents and strengths. Responsibility number 5, and that's the saying yes and can't say no, and can't let go. And so that was showing up for me there, wanting to serve all my clients and not say no to them. So that's how I think that came about. So how it was that sort of fatigue started to set in, and I actually got a bit of a cold, sore throat, runny nose, a real bad case of the man flu, Leanne. It was so bad.
At least your wife didn't have to deal with it if you were in other parts of the country.
Oh, no. I brought it home, and she had to look after me. But in all seriousness, I know that to be able to do it, what I need to do is think about what I eat and drink. So over the years, as a facilitation tip, 100%, you've got to think about what you're putting into your body. And hydration is key. I know that. I do like my coffee, so I'm very mindful that I, start the day with a coffee, but not first, but, in the morning. I might have 2, but then no more. And it's move on to peppermint tea, or even at the end of the day, maybe another herbal tea. But certainly not too much coffee, and lots of water, so I'm hydrated. And, when you're facilitating in building office environments and air conditioning is drying you out.
It does.
It does. Also, I know from my voice, if I'm drinking lots of coffee and it's got milk in it, it impacts my throat, you know?
Yeah, well, actually, before this call, my husband's like, do you want a coffee? And I'm like, no. After the call, we'll go get a good one. But yeah, because it really restricts. I really feel it in my throat too.
Yeah, and I've noticed peppermint tea helps that a lot. Good. It does. Or lemon water actually helps a lot as well. So hydrated, and also the snacks that you're having when you're not facilitating, nuts and things like that are ideal. Not a lot of, I think I used to use muesli bars as a bit of a go-to because they're easy, but they're full of sugar. And so, yeah, not having them. And the other big thing is not drinking. I think over that period I had one night where I had a glass of red wine, but didn't for the whole rest of the time, and it makes such a big difference. And it's been hard, I must admit, to say when you're with a client and they're like, hey, let's have a couple of drinks, and you're like, no. And when you're traveling, it's easy to buy a glass of wine or a beer. It's so easy.
Last week I was down in Sydney for a strategy session and just having with a great group of people, and they were just on it. I did leave early, but I did have a few as well, and I think I agree with you. Brain wasn't as switched on as it would have been.
Yeah, and it's having that self-control, I guess, to say no to it. And because I know that, if I've got to facilitate in the morning and I'm starting at 8 o'clock, I'm going to be there at 7 o'clock, make sure everything's set up, everything's good to go. And can't do that if there's a bit of a fog, bit of a brain fog. So, not setting myself up with so many days back-to-back facilitation or anyone doing that, I don't encourage. And I wouldn't do it again. And creating some space for investing in ourselves. And it's hard to describe. I don't know, Leanne, if you have tried to articulate it, just that the emotional roller coaster ride you can be on facilitating of this space you create where it's so rewarding, where people are talking like they haven't talked before. Maybe they're connecting like they haven't connected before. We're getting at some great ideas, great content, and then it's like, then we come down again.
Yeah, actually one of our previous guests, Greg Mitchell over in Perth, he's like, I don't care if you've had the best workshop experience, the best speech ever in your life, a few hours later there will be a period of time where you just feel it's low. And he's been doing it for like 30, 40 years, and he said he still gets that. I think because it is an emotional job, especially like even the night before. I don't know how well you were sleeping. I didn't sleep very well last week because I was already thinking, I'd already prepared a lot, but my brain was still going about, well, what if this happens and what if this happens, and I couldn't switch that off. So I need to work on that. But then you get so excited, you get great moments, and then afterwards it's like, and I think that's where it's really important to then reflect, and then so you can start building, I guess, for the next time, what went well, even better, and not really focus too much on that 1% of the time where it wasn't the best. Yeah,
true. Just on sleep, one of the biggest things I've started doing for how long? Probably 3 years, maybe more, is magnesium powder before I go to sleep. My wife's a naturopath, and just magnesium in water. It calms my muscles, but also calms my mind and helps me sleep so much better.
Oh, so good. Thank you.
Yeah, honestly, ideal. I'm not a practitioner, but happy to provide some suggestions, but honestly makes such a big difference. So when I travel, I take a bit of that and it does calm me down, that's for sure.
Yeah, cool.
And you're using a lot of that up when you're on your feet and facilitating. I got a tip recently, which I would like to share with everyone, and that is we shouldn't critique our facilitation or our speaking for at least 24 hours. So I was talking to someone recently after a session, and I went, I could have done this and I could have done that, and they said this, and I could have asked these additional questions. Maximize a bang straight in there. And she said, you know what, Murray? She said, don't critique those sessions for 24 hours. Let it sit first and then start to go through that process, because we're so hard on ourselves straight away. And I thought it was a really good tip.
That is a really good tip.
I think the other thing is I think about the learning journey that people are on, and they're going to be at different stages after a workshop. Some will get it, some will get it maybe later, some might get it further. And my analogy I use of this is microwave popcorn. Are you familiar?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So I haven't cooked microwave popcorn for some time, but what I do know is that on the bag it says, put this bag this side up and don't walk away from the microwave. And when it starts to slow down the popping, take the popcorn out. So we get a few pop at the start, we get the mass starts to pop, and then a few are popping, and then you take it out. Put it in the bowl, sit down with the family and watch a movie. And in the bottom of the bowl, there's always some kernels that haven't popped. So I think about our people that we are working with like those kernels of popcorn. Some just get it like that. Yeah. Bang, I've popped. Then you get the mass pop, and the mass popping might happen in the workshop, might happen afterwards in conversations, or you might have a few that pop afterwards and down the track. You also get some that, you know what, they maybe just this isn't the time for them to pop. And if we, sorry, you go.
No, go.
I was going to say, and if you put them back in the microwave, they don't pop. So it's about what else can we do? What else do we do to help support those people?
That's a brilliant analogy.
Yeah, I thank you. And I like to, so again, it's about that environment and that process that's created before and after the facilitation workshop, whatever it might be, to support that learning process. So you asked me before about dysfunctional team. What do you do when someone says, hey, this team's not getting along? What do you do? I've done some little things like an audit. So, and I don't use the word audit, of course, but it's more like I want to catch up with some people in the team. How do they think it's going? So we do that. I might send out a survey. So I've got a couple of short online surveys of just some questions around what's working well, what's not. If you could make this team awesome, what would that look like? What would you like to see more or less of? So getting some feedback and insights from the team members. Talking to the leader about their perspective, how things are going. And quite often the leaders had some contribution. You know, leaders set the culture. So and also even get an insight of where that leader's at around their ownership of the culture and how the team's going is important. Some communication to the team before the workshop. Because and I'm sure you have, Leanne, it's like you start the session, everyone's like, I don't know why I'm here and what this is for. So reducing that as much as possible. So some communication about that. The other part is knowing what the team's been through in the past. What have they been exposed to, what programs, what models, what tools, so that you can either support those or revisit those and, again, give you that context of where the team's at in their learning journey. And then, as I think I've already mentioned, but following up afterwards. So I often catch up with the leader of that team for a cup of coffee, how are things going, what's working, what's not. Here's some tips, keep it going. Because I think that's that journey, it's a process.
It's keeping that momentum going, I think, which is really important. Now, Murray, you've offered so many tips, stories for our first-time facilitator audience. If you had to go back to 2005 when you were made redundant and started this journey in facilitation, what's one piece of advice that you'd tell yourself?
Thanks for the questions this morning, Leanne. That's great.
It's waking you up, right?
I've got a couple, actually. One is to speak clearly. I can get excited. So communication, number 3 in my Gallup Strengths Finder top 5. And that communication in its basement can be talking fast and just slow down a little. So slow down and just talk a bit clearer. That's one. And even slowing down more in what I'm doing. And so what I take from that, and that's, so I want to serve others, help others develop, help others grow. Let's go. Come on, let's do this. But what we need to do, and what I've learnt, is it's that actually let's slow down in this section, or let's slow down in this workshop, or let's slow down right now to talk about it. And that's been a real big thing that I've learnt over the years. And it's funny, I was talking to some people recently about the debrief process after doing an experiential activity. And the comment was made is, sometimes we don't have time to do the debrief because we've got to stick to the agenda. And I said, hang on. I said, what I honestly believe and think is that you got to have that debrief conversation. Otherwise, you've lost the impact of the activity. Slow down, have that conversation. What does this mean? What are our insights? How can we use what we've just experienced when we go back in the workplace in our team? And that might mean you don't cover something in the agenda, but it's about serving them right there and having that conversation. So, yeah, I think it's a great question that you asked me, and I think it's about that slowing down when that's needed.
I don't really slow down either, so thank you. I'm going to take that on board too. And I get very excited and talk very quickly as well, especially around topics like this that I'm really passionate about. So great advice. Murray, thank you so much for everything that you've offered our listeners today, and even the insight that I've received from this conversation. If people want to connect with you, talk to you, ask you questions, where can they find you?
So my business name is Inspire My Business, and I'm primarily on Facebook and Instagram, also on LinkedIn, but I'm trying to use Instagram because it's just such a simple tool, and I love sharing pictures and messages. So I'm there as Murray Guest, but also if you want to contact me, you can drop me an email at the Inspire My Business webpage.
Perfect.
Can I say, Leanne, it's been awesome chatting to you. You've got a great energy, and I love what this podcast is all about, and creating a space and an opportunity to share those tips with people from different facilitators. So you're doing awesome work. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much for your feedback. And yeah, it's lovely having guests like you on the show. So I'm sure everyone around the world will appreciate everything that you've shared today, and everything that Murray has shared will and his contact details will pop on the show notes. Thanks again, Murray.
Thank you so much, Leanne.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the First Time Facilitator podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you'd like to keep up to date with all the episodes, make it easy for yourself and hit that subscribe button in your favourite podcast player. Leave a review in iTunes. Every bit helps. Thanks again, and speak to you all next Monday.